The night was alive with chaos. Flames roared into the sky, devouring the two-story home in Cedar Grove, a quiet Wisconsin town where neighbors knew each other by name, and the biggest excitement was the annual 4th of July parade. But tonight, the peaceful streets were bathed in an eerie orange glow, and the air was thick with smoke and the acrid stench of burning wood. "Get back! The house is going to collapse any second." Jason Callahan's voice cut through the chaos, though it was nearly drowned out by the crackling inferno. His heart pounded as he watched the fire consume the home, its hunger insatiable. Firefighters battled the blaze, their hoses spraying arcs of water that seemed futile against the fire's relentless fury. Jason had been the first to call 911 when he saw the flames creeping up the side of his neighbor's house. He'd rushed to help, managing to pull Sarah and her two children, Ella and Tommy, to safety just as the front porch gave way with a deafening crash. Their father, a truck driver, was miles away on a long haul, leaving Jason as their only lifeline. "Is everyone out?" one of the firefighters shouted, his voice muffled by his oxygen mask. Jason turned to Sarah, who clutched Tommy to her chest, his small face buried in her soot-streaked shirt. Ella se aferró a la pierna de su madre, sus sollozos amortiguados contra el tejido. Sarah's eyes were wide with panic, her face streaked with tears and ash. "I think so," Sarah stammered, her voice trembling. A sharp bark pierced the night. Jason froze. His stomach dropped as he turned toward the sound. "Duke!" Sarah gasped, her voice breaking. "Where's Duke?" Before anyone could react, a flash of golden fur darted past them. Duke, the family's loyal golden retriever, had slipped free from Ella's grip and was sprinting toward the burning house. "Duke, no!" Sarah screamed, her voice raw with desperation. Jason lunged after the dog, but Duke was too fast. He disappeared through the burning doorway, swallowed by the thick smoke and flames. The heat was unbearable, even from a distance, and Jason stumbled back, his heart racing. "He'll never make it out of there," one of the firefighters shouted, his voice heavy with resignation. Sarah collapsed to her knees, her sobs echoing in the night. Ella wailed, and Tommy stared blankly at the flames, his small hands clutching his mother's shirt. Jason felt a lump rise in his throat. He knew the fire was too intense. Duke wasn't coming back. Seconds stretched into an eternity. The fire roared on, its orange light dancing against the smoke-filled sky. The crowd of neighbors, gathered at a safe distance, watched in stunned silence. No one dared to speak. No one dared to hope. Then something moved in the doorway. Gasps filled the air as a shape emerged from the flames. Duke! But he wasn't alone. Clutched gently in his jaws, covered in soot and barely moving, was a tiny bundle of fur. A firefighter rushed forward, scooping Duke and his precious cargo away from the collapsing house. Another grabbed a blanket and wrapped the small creature inside. Jason blinked, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. "What is that?" The firefighter holding the bundle turned, his face a mix of awe and disbelief. "It's a kitten." A hush fell over the crowd. Duke lay on the pavement, panting heavily. His golden fur was singed in places, his chest heaving from the exertion. Yet, despite everything, his tail wagged weakly. The tiny kitten, barely bigger than Jason's hand, twitched its nose and let out the faintest mew. Sarah gasped, pressing a hand to her mouth. Ella had stopped crying, her wide eyes fixed on the soot-covered kitten. Tommy hesitated, then reached out a small, trembling finger. Jason crouched beside Duke, rubbing his head. "You crazy, incredible dog." Duke licked Jason's hand before turning his tired eyes toward the kitten, as if making sure it was safe. The firefighters checked the kitten quickly, confirming it was weak but alive. They wrapped it in a warm towel and handed it to Sarah, who cradled it like a newborn. "Where did he even find it?" one of the firefighters asked, shaking his head in amazement. Jason exhaled, finally allowing his heart rate to slow. "I have no idea, but that's Duke for you." The fire raged on, but for one small moment, hope burned even brighter. As the flames began to wane and the firefighters gained control, the neighborhood buzzed with a mixture of relief and amazement. Neighbors gathered at a safe distance, their murmured conversations weaving together a tapestry of shock and admiration. Duke was now the center of attention, though the golden retriever himself seemed unfazed by the hero worship. Jason stood off to the side, arms crossed, watching as Sarah and her children cradled the kitten. Tommy was finally smiling, his tiny hands petting the kitten's head, while Ella whispered promises of love and care. Sarah knelt beside Duke, running a gentle hand through his fur. "You're one incredible dog, you know that?" Duke wagged his tail slowly, his tongue lolling out as he leaned into her touch. His fur was still singed in places, but the light in his eyes was steady. It was as if he knew he had done something extraordinary, but wasn't about to make a big fuss about it. Jason shook his head and crouched beside Duke. "I don't know how you managed it, buddy," he said, scratching Duke's neck, "but you just became this town's biggest hero." The firefighters finally approached, their heavy boots crunching on the charred remnants of the front lawn. Chief Roy, a grizzled veteran with decades of experience, removed his helmet and crouched down to inspect Duke more closely. He gave the dog a serious look before nodding, his weathered face breaking into a rare smile. "Well, I'll be," Roy said. "You don't see that every day. A dog running into a burning house to save a kitten. That's something to remember." One of the younger firefighters, still adjusting his oxygen tank, chuckled. "Maybe we should put him on the crew. I've never seen anyone move that fast." The neighbors laughed, and the tension in the air began to ease. People pulled out their phones, snapping pictures of Duke and the kitten. Some called friends, eager to share the unbelievable story. "Duke's always been a good dog," Sarah said, tears still glistening in her eyes. "But tonight, he showed us something truly amazing." Jason glanced back at the house. The flames had reduced it to a smoldering skeleton, but in the end, it didn't matter. Everyone was safe, and that was what counted. The footage of Duke and Ember played on repeat across local news channels, their story spreading like wildfire. Soon, national outlets picked it up, and morning shows clamored to have Sarah and her children share their harrowing experience. Duke became a household name overnight, his picture plastered across social media and news websites. Fans from across the country sent letters, packages, and even custom-made collars. A local bakery created Duke's Hero Biscuit, donating proceeds to the town's animal shelter. Jason watched it all unfold with a mix of pride and disbelief. He had always loved animals, but Duke had shown him just how extraordinary they could be. The dog had taught him that bravery wasn't confined to humans, that sometimes the most incredible acts of courage came from the unlikeliest places. As the weeks passed, life in Cedar Grove began to settle back into its usual rhythm. The house would take months to rebuild, but Sarah and her family were staying with relatives nearby. Ember grew stronger every day, her fur shiny and her tiny paws playful as she pounced on Duke's tail. The two had become inseparable, a pair that seemed destined to be together. Jason often found himself at Sarah's temporary home, helping with repairs and bringing Duke along for visits. It was during one of these visits, as he watched Ember curl up next to Duke on the porch, that he realized how much the dog had changed not just the family's life, but his own. Duke had shown him the power of loyalty, the importance of stepping up in moments of crisis, and the simple beauty of a selfless act. One sunny afternoon, as Jason sat on the porch with a cold glass of lemonade, Sarah joined him. She set a plate of cookies on the table and leaned back in her chair, her face relaxed for the first time in weeks. "I still can't believe it sometimes," she said, looking at Duke and Ember. He ran into that fire without a second thought. It's almost as if he knew he had to do it. Jason nodded. He did what needed to be done. It's as simple as that. Sarah glanced at him, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Jason, for everything. I don't know how we would have gotten through this without you." He shrugged, smiling. "I think Duke deserves most of the credit." They both laughed, and for a moment the weight of recent events lifted. In that instant, Jason felt a renewed sense of purpose. The town, the neighbors, even the reporters, they had all seen what a single act of courage could do. It was a reminder that hope could shine through even the darkest times, and that sometimes the greatest heroes walked on four legs. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, painting the town in shades of gold, Jason looked out over Cedar Grove and felt a deep sense of peace. Duke lay contentedly at his feet, Ember nestled beside him. The world was still full of challenges, but Jason knew one thing for certain. As long as there were souls willing to act with bravery and kindness, there would always be hope. Winter crept into Cedar Grove, its icy fingers wrapping around the town. Snow dusted the rooftops and blanketed the ground in a pristine white layer, but the buzz of excitement surrounding Duke's heroics still lingered in the frosty air. People stopped Jason in the street to ask about Duke, while children pestered their parents to visit Sarah's temporary house just to catch a glimpse of the dog and his little feline friend, Ember. Jason found himself navigating a strange new world where Duke wasn't just his trusty companion anymore, he was a local celebrity. Invitations poured in for community events, from elementary school assemblies to the annual Christmas tree lighting ceremony. Every time Duke made an appearance, people gathered around with cameras, hoping to capture a moment with the heroic golden retriever. Jason couldn't help but feel a bit overwhelmed by all the attention, but he knew it was all for a good cause. The local animal shelter, inspired by Duke's story, launched a campaign to encourage pet adoptions and responsible animal care. They set up booths at every event Duke attended, handing out brochures and accepting donations. Jason and Sarah teamed up to help out, bringing Duke and Ember along to show what could happen when pets and people formed a bond of trust and love. Despite the constant stream of events, Jason made sure Duke still had plenty of time to just be a dog. They went on long walks through the snow-covered woods behind Jason's house, the kind of walks that reminded him why he'd fallen in love with Cedar Grove in the first place. Duke would bound through the snowdrifts, kicking up sprays of white powder, while Ember trotted along behind, her tiny paws leaving delicate tracks in the snow. It was during those quiet moments, away from the cameras and the crowds, that Jason felt most at peace. Sarah's children, Ella and Tommy, had taken to calling Duke Superdog. Every time they saw him, they'd run up with giggles and hugs, sometimes draping a little red cape over his shoulders. Duke would endure it with a patient expression, his tail wagging gently, as if he understood that this was just another way he could bring happiness to those around him. Ember, meanwhile, had become the family's little shadow, curling up on Sarah's lap during movie nights and batting at Ella's yarn when she tried to knit. The bond between the children, the kitten, and Duke grew stronger every day. With each passing week, the story of Duke and Ember's incredible rescue became a kind of folklore in Cedar Grove. Parents told their kids the tale before bedtime, spinning it into a lesson about bravery and kindness. It wasn't just a story about a dog and a kitten anymore. It was a story about the community coming together, about neighbors helping each other in times of crisis, and about the extraordinary courage that could be found in the most unexpected places. The holidays added another layer of magic to the story. The town square was transformed into a winter wonderland with twinkling lights strung across every tree and lamppost. The annual Christmas parade included a special float dedicated to Duke, complete with a giant paw-shaped sign that read, "Cedar Grove's Hero." Jason and Sarah rode on the float with Duke and Ember by their sides, waving at the crowds that lined the streets. As they passed, children cheered and threw confetti, their faces lighting up at the sight of their favorite four-legged hero. While the parade was the highlight of the season, Jason found himself most moved by the quiet moments. On Christmas Eve, he joined Sarah and her children for a simple dinner at their temporary home. The table was adorned with homemade decorations, and the air was filled with the warm scent of cinnamon and pine. Duke lay near the fireplace, his golden fur glowing in the firelight, while Ember batted at a shiny ornament hanging from the tree. It was in that cozy setting, surrounded by people who had become like family, that Jason realized just how much his life had changed since that fateful night. After dinner, Jason stepped outside for a moment, taking in the stillness of the snow-covered landscape. The moon hung low in the sky, casting a gentle glow over the town. He could see the charred remains of Sarah's old house in the distance, now covered in snow. The sight brought a pang of sadness, but it was tempered by the knowledge that they had all made it through, thanks to Duke. "Hey," Sarah's voice called softly from the doorway. She stepped outside, wrapping a scarf around her neck. "You okay?" Jason turned and smiled. "Yeah, just thinking about everything that's happened. It's been a lot." She nodded, her breath visible in the cold night air. "It really has. But you know what? We're lucky. Lucky to be here, lucky to have each other, and lucky to have Duke." Jason chuckled. "You're right about that. He's one of a kind." They stood there for a while, watching the snow fall silently around them. In that moment, it didn't matter that the house still needed rebuilding or that the road ahead would be long. What mattered was that they had come through the fire together, stronger and more united than ever. Volunteers poured in, eager to support the shelter's efforts. What began as a local initiative quickly grew into a community-wide movement, with schools, businesses, and churches pitching in to improve the lives of animals in need. Duke's story had sparked something far bigger than anyone could have imagined, a wave of kindness that rippled through Cedar Grove and beyond. For Jason, the biggest change was within himself. He had always cared about animals, but now he felt a deeper sense of responsibility. Duke's courage had reminded him of the importance of kindness, not just toward pets, but toward everyone. He found himself reaching out more, getting involved in community projects, and building stronger connections with his neighbors. It was as if Duke's act of bravery had set off a chain reaction, spreading goodness throughout the town. Of course, Duke and Ember remained blissfully unaware of their celebrity status. For them, life was about the simple joys, playing in the yard, lounging in the sun, and curling up on the couch at night. Ember grew into a sleek, playful cat who loved to pounce on Duke's tail, while Duke remained as loyal and gentle as ever, always looking out for his little feline friend. Every so often, Jason would look at Duke and wonder how one dog could have made such a difference. But then he'd remember, it wasn't just the act of running into a burning house that mattered, it was the love and loyalty behind it. Duke's heroism had inspired people to be better, to care more deeply, and to find hope even in the darkest times. In Cedar Grove, life went on as it always had, but now there was a sense of pride and purpose that hadn't been there before. The town would never forget the night Duke ran into the flames, and they'd never forget the lessons he taught them. As the seasons turned, as snow gave way to spring flowers and summer sunsets, Jason knew that the bond he shared with Duke was something truly special. It was a bond that had changed not just his life, but the lives of everyone in Cedar Grove. And it all started with a dog who simply refused to give up. As summer warmed the town, life in Cedar Grove settled into a comfortable rhythm. Children ran barefoot through the grass, their laughter carrying on the breeze. Duke and Ember remained local legends, their bond as famous as the daring rescue that had brought them together. For Jason, the season brought not only a sense of normalcy, but also a renewed appreciation for the quiet joys of small-town life. Jason had become a regular volunteer at the local animal shelter. The campaign that began after Duke's story went viral had blossomed into a full-fledged movement. People from surrounding towns now visited Cedar Grove Shelter, eager to adopt pets, donate supplies, or lend a hand. Jason spent long afternoons cleaning kennels, walking dogs, and chatting with potential adopters. He'd never considered himself much of an activist, but he couldn't deny the satisfaction of seeing so many animals find loving homes. Sarah, too, had embraced the community's renewed energy. While her house was being rebuilt, she threw herself into organizing events and fundraisers for the shelter. Every weekend, she hosted a pop-up adoption fair on her front lawn. Duke and Ember were the main attractions, drawing families and children who wanted to meet the famous pair. The fairs became a neighborhood tradition, a place where people gathered to share stories, enjoy homemade lemonade, and find their new furry companions. Ella and Tommy had taken on the role of junior ambassadors for the shelter. Ella, who had always been shy, now lit up when she spoke about the animals. She'd learned to tell each dog's story, sharing details about their personalities and what kind of home would suit them best. Tommy, meanwhile, had appointed himself as Ember's official playmate, keeping the kitten entertained while his mother and sister worked. One Saturday afternoon, as the adoption fair was winding down, Jason sat on the porch with Sarah, watching the kids chase Ember across the yard. Duke lay at their feet, his head resting on his paws, his tail swishing contentedly. "You've done something really amazing here," Jason said, glancing at Sarah. She smiled, a hint of weariness in her eyes. "I think we all have. None of this would have happened without you and Duke. You're the ones who started it all." Jason shook his head. "Duke's the real hero. I'm just along for the ride." Sarah laughed. "Modesty doesn't suit you, Jason. You've been here every step of the way. You've given your time, your energy, and your heart. That matters." Jason didn't know how to respond. He was used to being the guy who helped out behind the scenes, who showed up when people needed him but never sought the spotlight. Yet here he was, a central figure in a movement that had brought the community closer together. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting golden light over the yard, Jason realized something. He hadn't just been helping out at the shelter, he'd been finding his place in the town, in the lives of the people around him. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he truly belonged. Sarah began planning a housewarming party, not just to celebrate the new home, but to honor the town's resilience and spirit. It was her way of thanking everyone who had helped rebuild her life. Jason offered to help, and together they worked on invitations, decorations, and a menu that would feed the entire neighborhood. The party, held on a crisp autumn afternoon, was a resounding success. The yard buzzed with laughter, music, and the mouth-watering aroma of barbecued food. Children played games on the lawn while adults mingled, admiring the finished house. Duke and Ember, as always, were the stars of the show. People lined up to pet them, snap photos, and marvel at their unbreakable bond. Jason stood by the newly finished porch, a plate of food in hand, watching the scene unfold. It was everything he could have hoped for, a community united, a family back in their home, and a reminder of the good that could emerge from even the darkest times. As the sun dipped below the horizon and the party began to wind down, Sarah approached him, a glass of sparkling cider in her hand. "Thank you," she said simply. Jason raised an eyebrow. "For what?" "For being there when we needed you," she replied. "For helping us find our way again. You didn't have to do any of this, but you did. And it means more than I can put into words." Jason felt a lump rise in his throat. He wasn't used to this kind of gratitude, to being seen as more than just a guy who helped out. He nodded, swallowing hard. "I'm just glad I could be a part of it. It's been an honor." Sarah smiled, her eyes glistening. "You're not just a part of it, Jason. You're part of our family." Those words stayed with him as the evening wore on. When the last guests left and the yard fell silent, Jason sat on the porch steps, Duke by his side. Ember had curled up on a chair, her tiny form rising and falling with each breath. Jason looked down at Duke and ruffled a fur on his head. "Well, buddy," he said, "we did it." Duke thumped his tail against the step, his brown eyes warm and steady. Jason smiled. He knew the journey wasn't over, not for Sarah, not for the town, and not for himself. But that was okay. They had made it this far, and with Duke by his side, he knew they could handle whatever came next. As autumn gave way to winter, Cedar Grove transformed into a quiet, reflective town. The days grew shorter, the air turned brisk, and the streets were dusted with snow. Yet the buzz surrounding Duke and Ember showed no signs of fading. If anything, their bond had become the beating heart of a story that refused to stop inspiring. Jason found himself back at the local animal shelter, this time helping with their winter preparation program. The shelter had used the surge of donations to insulate kennels, provide thicker bedding, and stockpile supplies for the colder months. On this particular day, Jason was installing heated mats in the outdoor runs to ensure the animals stayed warm even on the chilliest nights. As he worked, he thought about how different things had been just a year ago. Back then, he'd spent most of his days quietly going through the motions of small-town life. Now, every morning felt like a new opportunity. He had a purpose, a community, and a sense of fulfillment he hadn't realized he was missing. And at the center of it all was Duke, who lay under a nearby tree watching Jason work with a calm, steady gaze. "You know," said Erin, the shelter's director, as she approached with a cup of steaming coffee, "we wouldn't have been able to do half of this without you and Duke." Jason accepted the coffee, smiling. "I think you're giving me too much credit." "Duke's the real star." "Well, yes," Erin said, "but you're the one who keeps showing up, and trust me, that means a lot." Jason shrugged, taking a sip. "It just feels good to help, and honestly, I like being here. The animals are great company." Erin laughed. "They are, aren't they? Unconditional love, wagging tails, and the occasional purring lap warmer. What's not to love?" Jason nodded, watching as a few of the shelter's dogs played together in the yard. "It's amazing how much these animals can teach us. They don't hold grudges. They don't worry about the future. They just live in the moment and love with their whole hearts." Our own smile softened. "I think that's why people connected so strongly with Duke and Ember's story. It reminded them of what's really important." They stood in silence for a moment, listening to the happy barks and the rustling of leaves in the breeze. Jason thought about what Erin had said. She was right. Duke and Ember had shown everyone the power of compassion and bravery. And though the initial wave of media attention had faded, the lasting impact on the community remained strong. As winter approached, so did new challenges. The shelter's increased visibility had brought in more animals, many of them rescues from less fortunate situations. It meant more work for the staff and volunteers, but also more opportunities to change lives. Jason threw himself into these efforts, dedicating long hours to making sure every animal was cared for. Duke and Ember often accompanied him. Ember, now a full-grown cat, had developed a regal air. She walked around the shelter as if she owned the place, greeting each new arrival with a gentle nuzzle or a playful swat of her paw. Duke, ever patient and friendly, acted as a calming presence. Nervous dogs seemed to relax when Duke was around, sensing his gentle spirit. One evening, as Jason finished cleaning up the shelter's main office, Erin called him over. She held a bundle of papers and had a hopeful look on her face. "We've been thinking about expanding our outreach," she said. "There are so many rural areas nearby with no animal services at all. I was wondering if you'd be interested in helping us start a mobile adoption unit." Jason tilted his head. "A mobile adoption unit?" "Yes," Erin said, her excitement growing. "We'd retrofit a van with kennels, supplies, and adoption materials. Then we could travel to those underserved areas and bring the animals to the people. It's ambitious, but I think it could make a huge difference." Jason thought about it for a moment. The idea intrigued him, not just because it was something new and exciting, but because it felt like a natural extension of the work they were already doing. "Count me in," he said. "When do we start?" Erin grinned. "We'll start planning tomorrow. Thank you, Jason. This is going to be incredible." The following months were a whirlwind of activity, Jason found himself in meetings, brainstorming sessions, and fundraisers. The community rallied around the idea, eager to see the mobile unit come to life. By the time the first snowflakes began to fall, they had secured enough funding to purchase a second-hand van and start the retrofit process. Duke and Ember were, of course, a part of every step. Duke sat quietly during meetings, his presence reassuring, while Ember had a habit of perching on Jason's shoulder as he took notes. Their involvement was a reminder of why they were doing all of this, to give animals a chance at a better life. When the mobile unit finally rolled out for its first event, the turnout was overwhelming. Families from nearby towns lined up to meet the animals, and by the end of the day, dozens of pets had found new homes. Jason watched as children hugged their new companions and older couples smiled warmly at the dogs and cats they had decided to adopt. It was a scene that filled him with pride and purpose. Duke and Ember were there too, as always. Duke mingled with the crowd, accepting pats and belly rubs, while Ember claimed a spot on the van's dashboard, observing everything with her usual regal demeanor. Their presence was a reminder of the journey that had brought them all to this moment. As the sun set on that first mobile event, Jason sat on the back step of the van watching families walk away with their new pets. Erin joined him, her face glowing with satisfaction. "We did it," she said softly. Jason smiled. "Yeah, we did." Erin laid the folder on the main desk and opened it to reveal a stack of papers. Jason leaned in, curious. "We've been tracking the numbers from the mobile unit," Erin began. "Adoptions are up, which is amazing, but we're also seeing an increase in animals being surrendered in these outlying areas. Some of these places have no services at all, no shelters, no rescues, nothing. We're getting calls from people desperate for help, but we can only do so much." Jason nodded slowly. He'd seen the growing need firsthand, and it weighed on him. "What do you think we should do? I've been working on a proposal," Erin said, tapping the papers. "It's ambitious, but I think we could start a network of foster homes in these rural communities. We'd provide the training, supplies, and support, and they'd provide temporary housing until we can find permanent homes." Jason considered the idea. It would be a massive undertaking, but it made sense. Fostering could bridge the gap between surrender and adoption, giving more animals a chance at a better life. "Do you have anyone in mind who could help?" "I have a list of potential volunteers," Erin said, sliding the folder toward him. "I'd love for you to take a look and see if you know any of these folks. If we can get even a handful of people to start, we can build from there." Jason spent the rest of the morning reviewing the list and making calls. Some people were immediately enthusiastic, eager to open their homes to animals in need. Others were hesitant, unsure if they could handle the responsibility. But by the end of the day, they had a small but promising group of volunteers ready to give it a try. Duke and Ember seemed to sense the importance of this new initiative. Whenever Jason made another call or filled out another form, they stayed close by, as if offering silent encouragement. Duke would rest his head on Jason's knee, while Ember curled up in a chair nearby, her quiet presence a comforting reminder of why they were doing this work. As the weeks went by, the foster network began to take shape. Erin organized training sessions, and Jason helped deliver supplies. The first few placements were challenging. Some of the animals had medical issues, behavioral problems, or simply needed time to adjust to a home environment. But the foster families persevered, their determination fueled by the knowledge that they were making a real difference. Word spread quickly about the new program. Local newspapers ran stories highlighting the volunteers who had stepped up to help. The attention brought in more offers to foster, more donations, and more community support. What had started as a simple idea was rapidly becoming a vital lifeline for the animals in the region. Despite the success, Jason found himself struggling to keep up with the constant demands. The mobile unit still needed regular maintenance and staffing. The shelter was busier than ever, and now the foster program required oversight. He often worked late into the night, updating records, coordinating transports, and following up with foster families. He loved the work, but the exhaustion was starting to catch up with him. One evening, as Jason sat at his kitchen table going over paperwork, Sarah stopped by. She had been helping out at the shelter whenever she could, and she could tell Jason was running on fumes. "You need to take a break," she said, setting down a tray of homemade cookies. "You can't keep going like this without burning out." Jason leaned back in his chair, rubbing his eyes. "I know, but there's just so much to do. If I don't keep at it, who will?" "Other people," Sarah said firmly. "You've built an incredible team. You don't have to do it all by yourself." "Delegate, take a step back when you need to. You'll be more helpful in the long run if you're not running on empty." Her words hit home. Jason nodded slowly, realizing she was right. He couldn't keep pouring from an empty cup. The next day, he sat down with Aaron and the other Corps volunteers to discuss how they could distribute the workload more evenly. They came up with a plan that allowed everyone to focus on their strengths and share responsibilities. It was a small but significant change that made a big difference. With the workload more balanced, Jason found himself able to enjoy the moments that mattered most. He spent more time playing with Duke and Ember, taking them on long walks through the snowy woods and watching as they romped through the drifts. He also started attending more community events, reconnecting with neighbors and seeing firsthand the impact their efforts were having. One afternoon, as Jason stood in the town square helping set up for the annual winter festival, a woman approached him. She held a leash in one hand, and at the other end was a small terrier mix that had been adopted through the mobile unit just a month earlier. "I just wanted to say thank you," the woman said, her voice warm and sincere. "This little guy has brought so much joy to our family. We never would have found him without what you and your team are doing." Jason crouched down to pet the terrier, who wagged his tail happily. "You're welcome. I'm just glad we could help." As the festival got underway, Jason watched as families enjoyed the festivities. There were children laughing as they rode the carousel, couples sipping hot cocoa by the fire pits, and people stopping to pet Duke and Ember as they strolled through the square. It was moments like these that reminded Jason why they had started this journey in the first place. The winter months passed in a blur of activity and progress. The foster network grew stronger, the mobile unit continued to reach new communities, and the shelter became a model for other towns looking to improve their own animal services. Jason still worked hard, but he had learned to rely on his team and to take time for himself. He knew that the work would never truly be finished, but that was okay. They were making a difference, one life at a time. As spring approached, bringing with it the promise of new beginnings, Jason felt a renewed sense of hope. The challenges would keep coming, but so would the successes, and as long as he had Duke and Ember by his side, he knew he could handle whatever lay ahead. Duke trotted over and nudged Jason's hand, his tail wagging gently. Ember followed, hopping onto a nearby bench and fixing him with her steady gaze. Jason smiled, crouching down to stroke Duke's fur and scratch Ember behind the ears. "Look what we've built together," he said quietly, "and this is just the beginning." As he spoke, he felt a renewed sense of determination. The journey wasn't over, and that was okay. With Duke and Ember by his side, Jason knew they would continue to make a difference, one step at a time. Springtime in Cedar Grove brought a renewed sense of energy and possibility. The snow had melted, revealing lush greenery and blooming flowers along the town's winding streets. The shelter's new satellite location was running smoothly, and the foster network was stronger than ever. Jason felt a deep sense of pride every time he walked through the doors of the renovated facility. The kennels were filled with animals waiting for their chance at a forever home, and every day brought new adoptions and new beginnings. Duke and Ember had settled into their roles as unofficial mascots of the shelter. Duke's calm, friendly demeanor continued to put nervous animals and people alike at ease, while Ember's quiet presence was a reminder of the unexpected connections that could arise in even the most challenging circumstances. They were a constant source of inspiration, a living testament to the power of love and second chances. One morning, as Jason arrived at the shelter, he was met by Erin, who was standing by the front desk with a clipboard in hand. She looked both excited and slightly nervous, her brow furrowed as she reviewed the papers in front of her. "Good morning," Jason said, setting his bag down on the counter. "What's going on?" Erin looked up and smiled. "Good morning. I'm glad you're here. I wanted to talk to you about a new opportunity that's come our way." Jason raised an eyebrow. "New opportunity?" "Yeah," Erin said, flipping through her papers. "We've been approached by a regional animal welfare organization. They're impressed by what we've accomplished here, especially with the foster program and the mobile adoption unit. They want to partner with us to expand our reach even further." Jason leaned against the counter, intrigued. How would that work? They'd provide funding, additional resources, and access to their network of experts. Erin explained. In return, we'd help them replicate our programs in other communities. It's a chance to make an even bigger impact. Jason considered the proposal. It sounded like a natural next step, but he knew it would come with challenges. "What's the catch?" Erin hesitated. "Well, we'd have to travel more, hold training sessions, and commit to a higher level of accountability. It's a big responsibility, but I think we're ready for it." Jason nodded slowly. "If it means helping more animals and supporting more communities, then it's worth considering, but we'll need to make sure we have enough manpower and time to handle the extra workload." "Exactly," Erin said. "I wanted to run it by you before we move forward. I trust your judgment, and I know you'll be honest about whether we're ready for this step." Jason appreciated her confidence in him. He thought about everything they had achieved so far, about the strength of their team and the passion of their volunteers. While it would be a significant commitment, he believed they could rise to the challenge. "I think we should go for it," Jason said finally. "Let's meet with them and see what the partnership would entail. If it's as good as it sounds, we can figure out how to make it work." Erin smiled, relief evident in her expression. "Thanks, Jason. I'll set up the meeting and let you know the details." As Erin walked away, Jason glanced over at Duke, who was lounging in his usual spot by the window. Duke looked up, his tail thumping lazily against the floor. Jason couldn't help but smile. Duke had taught him that sometimes taking a leap of faith was worth the risk. The meeting with the regional organization took place a week later. Jason, Erin, and a few key volunteers gathered in the shelter's conference room, joined by representatives from the organization. They discussed logistics, goals, and the potential benefits of the partnership. By the end of the meeting, Jason felt more confident than ever that this was the right move. Over the next several months, the shelter team worked closely with the regional organization to roll out new programs and training initiatives. Jason found himself traveling to neighboring towns, sharing their experiences and helping other shelters establish foster networks and mobile adoption units. It was hard work, but it was also deeply rewarding. Each time he returned to Cedar Grove, he felt a renewed sense of purpose, knowing they were making a difference far beyond their own community. Duke and Ember continued to play a central role in these efforts. Duke accompanied Jason on many of his trips, his calm presence helping to break down barriers and put people at ease. Ember stayed closer to home, but her story was shared in every presentation and training session. Her resilience and a bond she shared with Duke were a reminder of why they were doing this work. The partnership brought new challenges, but it also brought new opportunities. The shelter received grants to improve their facilities, hire additional staff, and expand their programs. They established spay and neuter clinics, offered behavioral training for foster animals, and started educational programs in local schools. The impact was tangible. Fewer animals in need, more successful adoptions, and a stronger, more compassionate community. As the seasons changed once again, Jason found himself reflecting on everything they had accomplished. What had started as a single act of courage had grown into a movement that touched thousands of lives. The shelter was no longer just a place where animals were cared for. It was a beacon of hope, a testament to the power of community and the enduring spirit of a dog and a cat who had shown the world what was possible. And as long as Jason had Duke and Ember by his side, he knew there were no limits to what they could achieve. Jason wandered the quiet streets of Cedar Grove, the cool evening air carrying the scent of fallen leaves. He reflected on how much had changed since Duke ran into the burning house that fateful night. What began as a single act of courage had sparked a movement, touching not only the town but countless lives beyond. Passing the park, Jason saw a family playing fetch with their dog, a rescue adopted months ago. The boy's laughter and the parents' smiles filled Jason with pride, knowing he'd played a part in that moment. Back at the shelter, Erin greeted him with a folder, her expression a mix of seriousness and excitement. "The regional organization wants to recognize us at their annual gala," she said. "They're giving us an award for our work and programs. They specifically mentioned you, Duke, and Ember as the heart of it all." Jason was stunned. "That's incredible," he said. Erin grinned. "Say you'll be there." Jason agreed, on one condition. Only if Duke and Ember can come too. The weeks leading up to the gala were a whirlwind. Between event preparations and shelter duties, Jason barely had a moment to himself. But whenever he felt overwhelmed, he looked at Duke and Ember, drawing strength from their resilience. On the night of the gala, Jason wore his best suit, while Duke sported a blue bandana and Ember a small bow. Their presence brought smiles to everyone they met. The ceremony was filled with animal welfare advocates and volunteers. When Jason took the stage with Duke and Ember, the audience's applause eased his nerves. "Thank you," he began. "This award isn't just for me or the shelter. It's for the volunteers, the families, and the animals who teach us what it means to truly care." Duke and Ember showed us that even in the darkest moments, there's hope. Together, we've built something incredible. The crowd erupted in applause as Jason stepped down, his heart full. Aaron and the team cheered while Duke settled at his feet and Ember purred in his lap. Driving home, Jason reflected on their journey, the challenges, triumphs, and the people who had joined them. It had all been worth it. As they pulled into the shelter, Jason looked at Duke and Ember. "We've done good," he said softly. Duke wagged his tail, and Ember met his gaze with her green eyes. The shelter was quiet, but alive with promise. Jason knew that as long as he had Duke and Ember by his side, he'd keep striving to make a difference. With that thought, he closed the car door, placed his hand on Duke's head, and walked toward the shelter, ready for whatever came next.